Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. Good morning or good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're located in the world. My name is Barbara Martinez. I'm the Open Innovation Director at Conservation X Labs, and I'm really happy that you're able to join us. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the application process for the Microfiber Innovation Challenge. As you'll notice, this is a webinar format. So if you have a question while I'm going through the presentation, feel free to type your question into the QA. There's also a chat function too. I'll try to monitor both of them, but if you can type a question into the QA, I will either answer the question during the presentation or wait until I'm at the end of the slides to answer questions. If you have questions after the presentation, feel free to send them to us. We provided you with an email in the invitation for this webinar. It's microfibers@conservationxlabs.org, and we're happy to answer your questions there. We also have a frequently asked questions page on the challenge website, and we update that as we get inquiries from people by email as well. So with that, I will get started. I'm going to turn my video off for this presentation, but wanted to say hello, have a face associated with the voice that you're about to hear. And so here we go. Okay. So the Microfiber Innovation Challenge, this is a competition that's being administered by Conservation X Labs. We are an organization based in the United States. We have a number of partners based around the world. This is a global competition where anyone in the world may apply. What we're looking for particularly are innovations that are at the post-prototype stage of development, and I'll go through that in a slide in a bit. And the applications need to be submitted through our application platform called Submittable. So this presentation is really meant to provide you with some pointers to help you create a compelling application. It's advice, it's guidelines. If you are to follow all of these guidelines and the advice, I just want to say that does not guarantee that your innovation will be selected as a prize winner by the judges and reviewers. As administrators at Conservation X Labs, we're the ones who are putting all the materials together. We aren't the reviewers or judges. We outsource we outsource the review process to panels of experts in this field and adjacent spaces as well. So I'm already seeing a question. Will this presentation be available? Yes, this presentation is being recorded, so we'll be able to share it afterwards. So some general best practices here for preparing your application. You want to assume that the reviewers and judges don't know anything about your innovation or your company or you. So you want to provide them with as much information as possible so that they can make a decision in your favor. They're evaluating what you provide them in the application. If you make a claim about something about the technical or scientific feasibility of your innovation, it is best that you back your claim up with data. Maybe it's not data that you've collected, but it could be data that someone else or a different team has collected on a similar type of innovation. And you can provide that to support your innovation as well. In your application, if you are stating that something is biodegradable or compostable, you will want to provide more detail because these terms really aren't clearly defined. There isn't a single definition for biodegradability or compostability. You'll want to explain under what conditions is your innovation biodegradable or compostable. And again, provide as much information as possible. You'll want to reply to your essay questions with complete sentences. So why? It really makes it easier for reviewers to evaluate your application and your innovation when it's an easy application to read. And so it makes it easier to read if you do have complete sentences. Sometimes it does make more sense to provide bullet points, but again, for clarity and making it easier on the reviewers, we recommend complete sentences. Another point here is that if a question has multiple parts, you want to make sure that you respond to all of those sections, all of those parts of the question. Even if you don't, even if the answer is no, or we don't have that information, you just want to make sure that you respond to everything that is being asked. If English isn't your strong suit, we do, in this competition, we do require that applications are submitted in English, but we recommend that you have an English-speaking colleague proofread your application, and you can add collaborators to your submittable application. And so I will show you how to do this on this slide. When you're in submittable, and once you have created your application, you can click the Invite Collaborators button in the upper right-hand corner. So what a collaborator does, or what they're able to do, is they have full access to the application as well. They can fill in the forms, they can fill in the text boxes. So they can help you with the editing and the writing. However, only the application owner, the lead author, the person who initiated the application, can submit it by the deadline. So I know this is really obvious, but I just want to make sure that one of the first things you want to do before working on starting your application is to make sure that your innovation is eligible in this competition. So what does that mean by eligibility? This is the Microfiber Innovation Challenge, and there are a couple of sub-challenge categories that that describe the scope of the competition. So within the scope of the competition, this first point here is we're looking for innovations that replace textiles that are sources of plastic microfibers with alternatives designed for non-toxic biodegradation in natural environments. And or innovations will prevent microfiber shedding through improved textile manufacturing processes. So this is through weaving or treatments, etc. Excuse me. What is out of scope in this competition are innovations that are further downstream of the material and the design of something that's going to prevent shedding of fibers. So we're not going to consider innovations that are collecting microfibers in the environment, monitoring microfibers, or any kind of research on the count of microfibers in the environment. We recognize that those are important innovations, but for the purposes of this competition, we really wanted to focus on the materials, the upstream innovations. So in addition to falling within the scope of the competition, you want to make sure that your application is complete and submitted by the deadline of June 25th. Again, it has to be submitted in English, that the innovation described in the application addresses the microfiber pollution problem and within the scope of the competition, which I just described. The innovation cannot be a pure policy solution. The innovation needs to be beyond the idea stage with a prototype at the time of the application that the application is submitted. At a minimum, this usually, if there's a prototype, that the minimum technology readiness level, or TRL, is at 4 and above. And I'll go through this on some slides later. So again, make sure that your innovation is eligible. And like I said, here's the scope of the challenge. These are the 2 sub-challenge categories. Your innovation may fall in one or both of these categories. We have our frequently asked questions, which you can visit. We update that as people send in questions by email. And another point here is that we recognize that people might be coming from outside of the textile and fabric design or industry. You might be coming from an adjacent industry, a different industry. So if you're adapting your innovation to address this problem of fiber shedding, you want to make sure that you describe how you will adapt your product or innovation to the textile industry. So you'll recognize that the application has two sections. To it, there's the demographic section, and then there are the essay questions. So I'm first going to just go through, I'm not going to go through all the demographic section questions. I'm only going to go through a few of them. And then I'll go through each of the essay questions in this presentation. So in the demographic question or section, it's important to note that most of these are not going to be evaluated by external reviewers. We're collecting this information that helps us at Conservation X Labs design our competitions. It helps us measure who is applying, the stage of development of applications. It really helps us to better design our future competitions and design our programs so that we can help innovators to succeed. However, you do want to pay attention to when questions are marked with with either of these symbols here. So the pound sign there, your response to these questions will be shared with reviewers if your application makes it to the second round. So you'll just want to pay attention and know that that response could be shared with reviewers if you make it to the second round of the application. The plus sign here, so your responses to these questions will be shared with the challenge partners. We're going to ask all of our challenge partners and reviewers if they're going to be signing non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, prior to having access to any information that you submit through your applications. So the reason why we're asking some of these questions here is that some of the partners in this challenge are interested in supporting the scaling and growth of innovations. We won't be providing all of our partners with all of the applications. However, we want to pull out pertinent information, summaries, so that we can summarize the innovations and innovators for challenge partners. They're participating here because they find that this is an important issue and they want to make it better. But they also note that they can collaborate or partner us or support the innovators that come through the competition. So the first question in the demographic section is, what is the title of your innovation? And this is really, again, this isn't something you're going to be evaluated on. Reviewers aren't going to give you a score based on your title, but this is informative for us as the administrators of the challenge. It's just an identifier that's going to be attached to your application. So now I'm skipping ahead. I said I wasn't going to go through all of the demographic questions, but I'll jump right ahead to this question number 9 in the demographic section. And it asks to briefly explain the types of capital raised to date and the terms. So the amount, the source, if it's equity, grants, etc. So this is really, you can provide as much information as you want to with us at Conservation X Labs. This is really to help us understand the stage of development, the funding that has already been provided to support your innovation, understanding if this is funding provided through grants, other prizes, if there's equity, if it's through sales, just to give us a sense of where you're at in the competition. And again, this is something that we would share some of this information with the partners in the challenge. Now, I noticed that there's a question in here about understanding who the challenge partners are. I don't have a slide in this presentation with all of our partners, but in the application itself, you can link and it'll take you to our website so that you could see all of the partners who are participating in the challenge. at the end of the presentation too, or perhaps Amy is typing the answer in there, listing all of our partners out. But we have a number of NGO partners, as well as a couple of brand partners and organizations that accelerate and incubate early stage innovations. So still in the demographics section here, question 12 is asking, what was the inspiration for this innovation? And provide a brief explanation. So this is a response that will be shared with reviewers if you make it to the second round. And this is really, you know, it really gives a sense of who you are as a team. What is your inspiration? Why are you spending so much time in this field with this idea, this company? You know, it's you were inspired to pursue this, and so we really want you to convey that inspiration to the reviewers. So there are, right after that question, we have two more. What do you hope to get out of this competition? And what do you hope to get from the partners in this competition? So again, this might feel a little repetitive to the previous question. However, this is, again, at Conservation X Labs, we want to support innovators in more ways than providing prize money. And this is really going to help us understand how we might provide additional support or resources by understanding what it is that you want to get out of this competition. Do you hope to meet other competitors through the process of the competition? Do you hope to meet the partners? Do you hope to improve the way that you talk about the value proposition of your innovation? Something along those lines. We're curious to know what you want to get out of the competition so that we can help you meet those needs if possible. And again, this question about what do you hope to get from the partners in this competition, you'll notice below there is the hyperlink to see the current list of partners. Again, you can you know, think about what it is if you had the opportunity to pitch your idea in front of Under Armour, who is one of our partners, or Finisterre, or Bolt Threads. What is it that you would hope to get through that interaction? So on question 15 here, if you make it to round 2, again, this this response will be shared with the reviewers. And it's briefly, how do you define success for your innovation? And again, this is going to differ for all of you, and but we're really curious about what does success look like for you or your innovation, for your team or for your innovation. Some ideas here maybe is success when you reach a certain number of consumers or manufacturers are using the product. Is it success when your innovation becomes a household name? Or is success something completely different? Then it doesn't have to be either of these examples that we've provided here, but we want to know what success means to you. And then this question, this is the, again, this response will be shared with reviewers, and you just have a very short, it's a 100-word limit, so it's not that much space, but just really to succinctly convey to the reviewers why you applied. Why is this challenge the right fit for you and your team and your innovation? It might be the timing. You know, just let us know, why did you apply for this challenge? And then this is the last question that I'll go over that's in the demographics section. It's a question on, do you have any patents or any IP, intellectual property that you would like or are in the process of getting patented relevant to this innovation? Does anyone else have rights to your IP? So again, here, just provide as much information as you're comfortable with sharing. We don't need to know the trade secrets here, or you don't need to go into the specifics of what your intellectual property is, but is some aspect of your innovation protected, legally protected? Just give us a sense of the IP relevant to your innovation. If you're in the process of filing any kind of patents, provisional patents in the US or in any country. Okay, so now I'm going to go through the application, the essay questions here. You'll want to respond to all of the questions in the essay section to the best of your ability. The reviewers and judges are going to evaluate your round one application essays based on whatever you respond in this section. They're going to have access to all of your responses in this section. So it's best to be honest and transparent in your responses. If you do not have the data or examples to back up your claims in your responses, then you'll want to include in your responses, for example, explanations of your plans to obtain data, how that data might be used to inform the development of your innovation and your business model. It's better to provide more information than to leave the reviewers guessing. You don't really want them to make assumptions that because you don't provide enough information. So we recommend that you provide as much information about your innovation in your application as you can. All right, so the criteria. These are the categories by which the reviewers will evaluate your application. There's feasibility, that the innovation is feasible based on its technical, team, and financial merits, that it's transformative, that the innovation is revolutionary, novel, or questions the fundamental assumptions in its approach. This is really, this is really looking at how creative and innovative is the approach to the microfiber shedding problem, microfiber pollution problem. Scalability, that the innovation has the growth potential due to its competitive advantage, demand and customer base, the value proposition, and the business model. And environmental impact, that the innovation will make a significant contribution in advancing conservation efforts and not shift the environmental burden, for example, to land, water, or excessive energy use. So the first question here is to introduce your innovation in a tweet. And we just selected a tweet here because it is a short, it's only 280 characters. It's a really succinct way of describing your innovation. And note that you're evaluated on your ability to succinctly describe the innovation. Question number 2 here is describe how your innovation works in more detail. So now you have a limit of 150 words to go into more detail about what is your innovation. This is the summary. So this is what reviewers will get your application packet. They will read this summary and you want to make sure that they understand after this summary that they know exactly what your innovation is. You're going to be evaluated here on your ability to clearly describe how your innovation works and what your innovation is. And again, you should assume that the reviewers and the judges, those who are evaluating your applications, that they don't know anything about your application ahead of time. So the third question here is, what problem does your innovation solve and how does it solve this problem? And you want to be specific. So what you're evaluated on is that you clearly describe the problem and how that innovation solves the problem. You also want to note how your innovation has the potential to transform the microfiber pollution problem. So because we have defined the competition as we understand that the problem is the shedding of plastic-based microfibers, you're probably all going to be describing similar problems, but the way that you're approaching the problem is going to be unique across applicants. And just make sure that you describe how it is unique and how you are addressing the problem. So question number 4 and 5 here is really focused on the stage of your innovation. The first question is a yes or a no. Do you have a prototype? And then describe the stage of your innovation. So what we mean by the stage of your innovation is this is how far along you are in the creation and deployment of your innovation. You basically want to justify your technology readiness level here, which is the next question. For example, if your innovation is at a TRL 4, where your technology has been validated in a laboratory, for example, just describe what your lab prototype was tested in, under what conditions, what were some of the findings, and what are your next steps. And then the next question is, what is the technology readiness level? And so this is a number between 1 and 9. And again, like we said, at a minimum, you should have a working prototype. And this is typically a TRL of 4 or above. And we're asking you to self-identify your technology readiness level. We provide a link to the Wikipedia page for technology readiness level. And if you've explored that link, you'll note that different organizations have somewhat different definitions for each stage of TRL. It's not necessarily that a TRL 4 there's different wording, I guess, and some are more clear than others, the descriptions of what your stage of development is at each TRL. So this is an example of descriptions of each technology readiness level. And we can provide this I believe this is on the frequently asked questions of our website as well. So if you look at TRL 1, 2, and 3, these are all really early ideas where you perhaps don't have something tangible or physically produced yet, where you're maybe at the idea stage, maybe you're running modeling experiments. At 4 is where there is some component, some aspect of your innovation has been validated or tested in a lab setting or in a excuse me. There is, for example, a small scale prototype, a minimum viable product. And beyond technology readiness level 4 is what we're expecting to see in this competition. Again, it needs to be well beyond the idea stage. And so if there are any questions with the stage of your innovation and you want to ask any of us at Conservation X Labs, you're welcome to send us an email and we can help you understand if you feel like you're at the right stage of development. Excuse me. So the question 7 here is really asking you to upload a photo that shows proof of your existence of the innovation. This is the only visual that you get to provide in the application. It's the only thing that we allow you to upload to attach to this application in the first round. So be strategic. Select something that is going to demonstrate what your innovation looks like. This doesn't just have to be a photograph, but if you create, it could be an image that you create through PowerPoint or something. There's multiple file types that you can select from in order to upload. All right, so question number 8 here is to demonstrate the feasibility of your innovation. You'll want to provide evidence that your team has tested or demonstrated your innovation. And so, for example, describe how and when and where the innovation was tested or demonstrated. Have you tested it in a lab or a natural environment? So this is natural environment we would just define as anything outside of the laboratory. And if you have evidence of your testing or demonstrations, again, evidence being, how, when, and where, or any kind of data, any kind of findings that you want to share, this is where you can share that. Again, it's an essay question, so you just have to describe through a narrative. You're not able to upload any kind of findings here, but for example, if you have something published in a journal, or if there's a link to a publication, that could also, you could include that here as evidence of something that you've done. So question 9 is describe how your team has the expertise and capacity to develop and commercialize your innovation. Describe what gaps remain on your team. So you'll notice here that there are 2 questions, and you want to make sure that you address both of the questions. The first question is to describe your team and the expertise, how your team has the expertise and capacity to develop and commercialize your innovation. You don't necessarily have to so a couple of things. You don't have to state the names of people on your team if you don't want to. You can just describe, for example, their expertise, the number of people you have, or maybe it's that you describe the expertise and what aspects of the innovation or what aspects of the company that they are responsible for. It's really just to give the reviewers a sense of the size of your team, the expertise. And then the second question here is really important, to describe the gaps that remain on your team. And I know that this might feel like you aren't representing your team. If you do have gaps, for example, if you realize that you need a computer programmer for some reason, a software engineer, I think that it's more important to state that need and state that gap than to say than to not provide that kind of information. We would like you to be honest here, because while you are evaluated on this response by the reviewers, part of that evaluation is understanding that is your ability to convey, to honestly convey your stage of development, essentially, and to honestly convey your team and your team's needs. So if you don't have gaps in your expertise, you can simply state that, but I really recommend that you're honest here about the team and the needs for your team. Okay, question 10 here is, what tangible startup resources do you need? So this is capital, so that's funding, equipment, facilities, to scale your innovation. So what other tangible startup resources do you need in order to grow to the next stage? Um, It'll be helpful here to the reviewers to understand if it is funding and capital that you need in order to grow, how much do you need? Or an estimate of how much do you need? If you need facilities and equipment, what kind of facilities and equipment? If you need anything, any other types of resources in order to scale, just be as specific as you can. And again, this helps the reviewers understand the feasibility of your innovation, but it also the types of resources and assistance that might be provided through this competition. Okay, question 11 is, who are your major competitors and who or what kinds of companies might become your competitors? And you'll want to briefly explain why you are different. And in other words, so this is a question about your competitive advantage. It's really critical here. The critical piece is to describe why you're different, why you are better, what is your advantage. You might not know the names of your competitors, but you might, for example, know about other types of innovations or people using the same approaches as you whom you might consider as competitors. Again, what I want to stress here is that the really important piece to this question is conveying your competitive advantage and why your innovation should be selected as a prize winner, why your innovation should move on to the next round over anything else that looks similar to your innovation. Okay, question number 12 is, who are your customers and why would they pay for your innovation? So again, there's two parts to the question here. First, you want to describe who are your customers. Who is going to be, who are you making the innovation for? Users and customers might be different to you, and so that's, if so, then you might want to describe that as well. Who's going to use your innovation versus who's going to pay for your innovation? The second question here is why? Why would they pay for your innovation? If you have not done any customer discovery yet, or you're not aware of your customer base, then it's really important to state that in your response. If you have time to do some customer discovery before you submit your application, then that's probably I think it's a good idea. I would recommend it, because then reviewers might appreciate reading at least that there's some research done or some customer discovery versus a response that says that you have not done customer discovery yet. And another note here is that knowledge of your customer base and why they would pay for your innovation is an important pillar of your value proposition. And so if value proposition is a new term to you, we have a link here to a video that gives an explanation of what a value proposition is, as well as some examples. And you'll note that the criterion here is that you clearly, the criteria is that you clearly describe your customers and the value proposition of your innovation. So question 13 here is to briefly describe your business model. Include in your response, what is the end product of your innovation and through what channels will you reach your customers? So note that you'll be evaluated on the basics of the business model and that those make sense for commercialization and growth. You want to ensure that at a minimum, you include responses to what is the end product of your innovation and through what channels, which in other words, pathways, will you reach your customers? So those channels, for example, do you reach your customers directly of B to C or through an intermediary business, B to B, or some combination? give us a good sense, give the reviewers a good sense of these basics in order to understand what your business model is, or what you plan on your business model being if you're not to the point of, um, of selling to customers yet. Question 14 is to please outline what is known about the life cycle of your innovation based on your current stage of development. This is from the raw material sourcing to the methods and treatments used to create the product, to how and where the product is manufactured and distributed, and to the product's end of life. So note that you'll be evaluated on that you consider the environmental impact of the full life cycle in the design of the innovation from sourcing to the end of life of the innovation. Now, we recognize that if you're not to the point of manufacturing and distribution, you're probably not going to have data or have a good understanding of what the impacts are at that stage of the life cycle. What we're asking for here is really what you understand at this point in the development of your innovation. What is the environmental impact at sourcing up to whatever stage you're currently in of development? We're not assuming or even asking that applicants have created a life cycle assessment or have undergone that kind of research or analysis. However, this question is, if you have gone through one, then feel free to share that information. Excuse me. Share that information. Really, what we're looking for here, what the reviewers are looking for, is a good understanding of the environmental impact of the innovation. So question 15 is, how does the design of your innovation consider the end of life? What steps have you taken to design for non-toxic biodegradation in natural environments through soil, for example, natural environments being soil or oceans, and then describe the testing or data you already have, if available. So again, I want to point out there are 3 parts to this question, and there are 3 slides to go through each of those parts. So the first question is to describe how, if at all, your innovation is designed for circularity or a microplastic-free end of life. For example, how does the design of the innovation impact what happens after it has been disposed of or is no longer used for its intended purpose? And then the second question here is, what steps have you taken to design for non-toxic biodegradation in natural environments? So this is in the soil, in the oceans. We recognize that, of course, all products and materials break down over time, over their lifetime. Natural biological degradation can occur in aquatic or soil systems. We're really seeking innovations that can degrade in the natural environment without requiring any additional inputs and without leaving behind any toxic constituents. So here we really want you to describe the specific conditions under which your innovation degrades and provide any research or data that you have to support this understanding. So even if your material, if your innovation does require these additional inputs in order to degrade into non-toxic constituents, it's really important that you include that information. Tell us under what, is it a certain temperature? Is it a certain, anything else, any other types of conditions, temperature, does it have to be a liquid condition? Does it have to be an industrial composter? Provide that information for the reviewers. And then the third question here again is describe the testing or data that you already have if available. So again, provide any kind of research findings or data that you have to support what you know about the biodegradation of your innovation. Again, you might provide citations to scientific papers. You can include data that's based on unpublished studies, but just let the reviewers know the source of the information that you're providing. And then question number 16 is, what is the overall environmental and social impact of your innovation? Identify the positive impacts as well as how you will mitigate for unintended consequences. So again, note that there are two questions here. There's more than one question. So first, describe the environmental and social impacts of your innovation. Again, this might sound similar to the question about the life cycle of your innovation, but this is more more general information on the impacts, the environmental and social impacts of your innovation. The second part here is to tell us about the positive impacts, but also the unintended negative impacts. It's it's better to admit and be aware and honest of any unintended or negative impacts or anticipated unintended impacts. Because here you also have the opportunity to explain how you will mitigate for those. The risk of responding that you have zero negative or unintended impacts is that the reviewers and judges might feel like they could make their own assumptions about what those unintended impacts are. So it's really important to be honest in this response. Tell us if you anticipate any kind of negative impacts of your innovation. And those might occur at any point along its value chain, along its life cycle. And then describe how you might mitigate for those negative impacts. Okay. So I just went through all of the essay questions, and I went through a few of the demographic questions. You may have already submitted your application. However, if you have, you can go back into Submittable, into the application platform, and you may request to edit your application. Well, that means that we would give you access to your submitted application. So it would reopen it. And you would have to, the only thing is you would have to make sure that you complete all of your edits and changes and submit it by the deadline on June 25th. If you go through this process, there's a text box that you have to send a message to us to justify why, and just write a really short note. It's just, you can just say, I want to edit my application. You don't have to give us a lot of detail. We'll reopen the application for you so that you can continue to work on it up until the deadline. And I also want to point out that we have an innovator's handbook available on our website. This handbook lists all of the application questions. It discusses the eligibility criteria. It lists our partners, partner organizations, and is just a helpful guide so that you have all the information in front of you before or to use while you are creating your application in the platform.